When I was a kid, my grandparents lived about 2 hours away from us. We lived around Akron and Canton, and my grandparents lived in Cambridge, Ohio. But considering how me and my siblings prepared, you would have thought that they lived across the country instead of just across a couple of counties. Every time that we made the trip to visit my grandparents, my siblings and I loaded up our car with everything that we needed to sustain us on such a long journey. We had snacks. We had games. We had books. We had toys. We had pillows. We had the particular music player of the day. I'd rather not say what kind it is. We had everything we needed to keep from getting bored and asking our parents if we were there yet. At least for the first 30 minutes or so. We had all of this stuff to distract us. Because even as kids, we knew that leaving home isn't always easy. Now, if you've ever gone anywhere, even if you are the world's best planner, you know that things don't always go according to plan. There's delays, there's detours, there's weather, there's directions to figure out, and unforeseen difficulties to deal with. There's always unforeseen difficulties. And even if you're going somewhere fun or exciting, it's still hard to be away from the familiarity and the comforts of your own home. And yet, most of us are traveling people. We can't help it. We are people on the move. Now, granted, most of our travels are temporary. We go away for work or we go on vacation. And we have the luxury of coming back to a nice home where things make sense. Now, some of you may have undertaken longer journeys traveling across continents or oceans to make home in a new place. But no matter the distance or the duration, journeys have a way of changing us. The things we experience, the people that we meet, even the challenges and the unforeseen difficulties that we face change us in big and small ways. Through our journeys, the big ones and the small ones, the world becomes a little less strange and all the more wonderful. So it's in this spirit of traveling, that we embark on a journey of journeys this morning. As people prone to wander and to travel, we'll consider a number of traveling stories found in the Bible over the next several weeks. And there's actually a good number of them once you start thinking about it and writing out a list. So if you have a favorite, please let me know, because I've been having a hard time narrowing them down. They are all just so interesting. Because it seems that God's people are always on the move. There's a lot of relocation and reorientation as people learn what it means to trust God and journey into an unknown future. So we begin this morning with the story of Abram. Now, most of us know him as Abraham, but he begins simply as Abram. The last entry in a long list of names going back 10 generations, all the way back to Noah's first son, Shem. I told Catherine to be thankful I didn't have her read those passages. But in these 10 generations, just name after name after name, we finally come to Abram, and we're not told really anything about him. He wasn't anyone special, at least as far as we're told. He didn't find favor with God for some reason, and he wasn't a man after God's own heart. We're not told if he was particularly faithful or if he was an upstanding citizen. He's just plain old Abram when we first meet him. Husband of Sarah, son of Terah, uncle of Lot, and father of no one. He and his wife Sarah don't have any qualifications whatsoever to recommend them as the ones through whom the whole earth would be blessed. The only fact that we know about him is that they don't have any children, and that they are too old to hope for any. But that doesn't stop God from singling them out. Now, as a whole, this is a significant shift in the biblical narrative. Except for a few conversations here and there with Adam, Eve, Cain, and Noah, God has been a little distant from creation in the first few chapters of Genesis. It's almost as though God's been sitting back, trying to figure out the idiosyncrasies of this new world that God created. It seems that these earthly creatures have minds of their own and are continually screwing things up. God's tried to correct it. God's tried intervening, has tried putting things back on track, but nothing's worked out so well. If you think about it, banning Adam and Eve from the garden didn't stop Cain from murdering his brother. Destroying the world with a flood didn't keep the people from coming back and building a tower to reach unto heaven like we heard last week. And odds are that punishing the builders by scattering them and confusing their languages will only slow them down for a little bit. God realizes that something has to change. This pattern of punishments isn't working out so well. So here in the story of Abram and Sarah, we see God trying something new. The story of Abram and Sarah marks a transition because it collapses the space between God and a people prone to evil. Here, God becomes directly involved in the life of one particular unremarkable family. But even though it's a divine coming together, it's a story that begins with a separation, with leaving home. With no introduction or explanation, God tells Abram and Sarah to leave everything that they know and they love. The familiarity of your homeland, the safety of your community, the comforts of your home. Leave everything and follow me. It's a line that we'll hear echoed later on when Jesus asked the disciples to leave their nets and to follow him. The story of Abram and Sarah is pretty sparse on details. Just like we didn't get an introduction to them, we don't see their reaction. It doesn't seem like they ask any questions. They don't hesitate to set off into the unknown. It seems like Abram and Sarah just said their goodbyes and left their families in Haran. They left their homeland, a city located near the modern-day border of Turkey and Syria. And they made their way to the holy place at Shechem, in what's now the controversial West Bank. These names that we hear in the news are ancient places. We see how Abram and Sarah's willingness to set out to an unknown land was credited to them as righteousness. In the great faith hall of fame that we find in Hebrews, Abraham is first commended for leaving his country, for leaving his homeland and going to the place that God would show him. But we think about how their journey is not unique. We add the modern day names to their journey, it's one that we see playing out on a global scale, as millions of people have been displaced and have fled the violence in Syria. I can't imagine what horrors would cause people to leave their communities and their homes and everything that they love, taking only what they can carry with them and setting off to an unknown future. The numbers are astounding. The pictures are heartbreaking. It's a humanitarian crisis the likes of which the world hasn't seen since World War II. And in the face of this suffering, it's easy to feel powerless. It's easy to lose heart when we think of immigration as an issue to be solved rather than stories to be heard and people to be loved. Lives that are precious to God. The story of Abram and Sarah reminds us that God has been with those who are strangers in a strange land from the very beginning. It's a reminder that God is with those seeking shelter and a place of peace in this world that's torn apart by evil. But in the story of Abram and Sarah, we also see how God recruits ordinary, unremarkable people to be the blessing that the world needs. As immigrants themselves, Abram and Sarah become a people. They become a nation called to care for the foreigners and the strangers among them. Samira Page is probably a name that you don't know, but she was a refugee herself. Fleeing persecution in Iran, she and her family made their way through Turkey. And there they hired smugglers to take them to Canada, where they could apply for political asylum. But for whatever reason, the smugglers took them to Mexico City instead. With only $500 in their pocket and 2 young sons, Samira and her husband went to work. And they saved up. And they were able to make their way across the border and settled in Dallas. And there she was first connected with a Baptist church and later found a home in the Episcopalian church where she was ordained as a priest. And she began to realize how to be a blessing to others. Samira founded this organization called Gateway of Grace, which is a ministry that has 2 very specific missions: to decrease the fear of refugees and to foster loving friendships between Christians and refugees in need. Samira is honest that she is not looking to convert people in the traditional sense of the word. What she's doing is seeking to model Christ's love. And that has the power to turn the world on its head. When we talk about refugees or Muslims, it's all abstract, Samira says. But when you meet a young mom or see a smiling child, you see, that's a mom like me. That's just a child. It melts those walls and those barriers. Gateway of Grace is about bringing people together, and it's at that point of meeting, that point of recognition where the transforming power of God's love is made real. See, in our story, we hear how God didn't just tell Abram and Sarah to leave their country, their people, and their home without a promise. Leave behind your old way of doing things, and I will bless you. I will make your name so great that it will be used in blessings, and all the people on the face of the earth will be blessed through you. God says, I am trying something new, and I want you to be part of it. Instead of punishing the world, instead of punishing each other, I want to make you a blessing. I want all of creation to be blessed. But I need you to help. And the same promise extends to us today. As God's beloved children, we're called to step out in faith. Because living into the fullness of life that God wants for us means stepping out into the unknown. It means stepping outside our complacency and our circle of concern. It doesn't quite mean stepping out from behind this pulpit yet. I'll work on my walking around. But joining God in this work of blessing means trading in the smallness of our world for the width and the breadth and the depth of all of creation. And sure, it can be scary. Stepping out in faith is rarely the easiest path to take, but it's a journey that leads to a multitude of blessings. The road is long, but it's not one that we travel alone. We journey together as God's beloved community, a band of travelers making our way through this world with the gospel as our guide. You may not think that you have anything to offer, especially in the face of suffering that is so great, but remember the only thing that we knew about Abram and Sarah. They were a nobody, unremarkable couple, without children and with no hope of having any, and yet God blessed them. God used them and their faithfulness to bless the whole world. Our faith journey may or may not call us to go far away from our homes, but it will always call us away from our old ways of doing things, our old systems, and our sense of security. Because this journey is about trusting God to do something new when the old ways don't work anymore. So not knowing where the road may lead, but knowing that we will be changed on it. I ask you to set out with me on this journey. Let us take heart and dare to try something new as we allow God to show us how to be a blessing. Amen.